with the Dalai Lama reaffirming that there will be a successor to him after his death, prospects of the historic standoff between China and the centuries-old institution continuing well beyond his lifetime are a certainty now. The Dalai Lama's July 2nd announcement about succession has predictably riled Beijing, which wants to impose its own Dalai Lama. There are now concerns that when Tenzin Gyatso, the current Dalai Lama, passes away, there could well be two rival ones, one officially chosen by his not-for-profit trust, and the other propped up by the Chinese Communist Party. To understand the implications of the succession battle, MCR spoke to Dr. Orville Schell, one of America's foremost China-Tibet scholars and authors who have spent decades studying and writing about various issues arising out of the conflict. Dr. Orville Schell. Welcome to Mayank Chhaya Reports, Dr. Schell. It's always a great pleasure to have you.
Well, pleasure to be with you.
Dr. Schell, my sense of the Dalai Lama's announcement is that he is perhaps reclaiming future history rather than yielding to the short-term strategic temptation of outwitting China by naming a successor in his own lifetime. What is your sense?
Well, I think it would be certainly out of normal tradition for him to name a successor before he passes away, and a reincarnation then in the traditional form has a time to take place. So I think what he seems to be doing is to try to remove the whole decision-making process from the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. Having been through that once with the Panchen Lama and Cheki Naima, the reincarnation that was chosen and disappeared, and the Communist Party appointed their own reincarnation. I think that's what His Holiness wishes to avoid this go around.
But irrespective of what he has done, what is to stop Beijing from going ahead and appointing a rival Dalai Lama anyway?
Well, I suspect Beijing will do it anyway. And there will be probably somebody in residence in the Potala and Lhasa, and you're going to have sort of like the two Vaticans, two popes in the in the Roman Empire, when you had Byzantium and Constantinople and Rome. Nonetheless, this is a way, I think, for His Holiness to assure that at least Tibetans that are living outside of Tibet have a spiritual leader.
Is there any possibility at all that they might even do it in his lifetime, just to be mean about that?
You mean that the Chinese Communist Party might?
Yeah, they might just go ahead and appoint one right away in the next maybe couple of years or something like that. I
suspect that would be a bit presumptuous. It's one thing for His Holiness to say that his reincarnation is preordained. It's another thing for the Communist Party, who eschews spiritual matters of all kinds, to make such a presumptuous dictum. But I wouldn't put anything beyond the Chinese Communist Party, and particularly in the question of Tibet and Xinjiang, which are extremely sensitive topics.
If you were Xi Jinping, how would you look at the announcement? Was it built into their strategic thinking already?
Well, I mean, fortunately, I'm not Xi Jinping. I think that he will see it as a great affront, as a challenge to the sovereign power of China to determine what happens within its sovereign territory. And remember, it fully believes that Tibet is a sovereign part of China. When the nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek and then the communists under Mao Zedong drew the Chinese borders, they drew the old Qing dynasty borders, which included all of Tibet, all of Xinjiang, all of Mongolia, although they lost outer Mongolia, all of Manchuria. So it was the largest rendition of China in history. But even though Tibet had not been fully consolidated within the national entity, either under the nationalists or even completely under the communists. That was the presumption. So as the leader of Tibet, it's a curious combination of a political leader and a spiritual leader. China would like to imagine that it holds the reins in its hands to determine who that person should be, particularly not someone living in India.
Right. Isn't that ironic that while on the one hand, the Communist Party clearly has atheistic underpinnings, on the other, they do recognize at least the symbolic importance of having a Dalai Lama, how do they reconcile these two contradictory streams?
I think politics trumps spiritual matters, and they don't. I mean, spiritual matters are just another element that they have to deal with, and that can be manipulated for better or worse to unify the quote motherland. So I don't think they waste a lot of sleep over it. There are many contradictions. Mao Zedong himself wrote many essays on contradictions. He loved contradictions, and he thought that's the way history moved. So such a contradiction as a spiritual matter and a temporal matter isn't one I'm sure the Chinese Communist Party leaders lose a lot of sleep over.
There are reports out of Beijing, I read in the New York Times and elsewhere, perhaps even on the BBC, that the government is already building a narrative where officials will go to schools and offices, essentially to drum up some support